I found the pregnancy test in his briefcase by accident, not mine. I'd stopped hoping for that particular miracle about 18 months ago, right around the time my husband stopped touching me. The test was positive, tucked between his iPad and a manila folder labeled Riverside Project. I was looking for our insurance cards because the pharmacy needed the information, and there it was, 2 pink lines that weren't meant for me. My hands didn't shake. That's what I remember most clearly. I stood in our bedroom, holding that plastic stick, and my hands were steady as stone. "Melissa?" David called from downstairs. "Did you find them?" I placed the test back exactly where I'd found it, zipped the briefcase, and carried it downstairs. "Right here," I said, handing him the insurance card. I watched his face. Nothing. He smiled that distracted smile he'd perfected over the past year, the one that never quite reached his eyes when he looked at me. "Thanks, babe." He kissed my forehead like I was his sister. That was Tuesday. Wednesday, I hired the private investigator. Thursday, I met with my lawyer. Friday, I learned her name was Rachel Brennan, 28, worked in his office as a junior architect. The PI showed me photos, David's hand on her lower back outside a restaurant, his car parked overnight at her apartment building, the two of them laughing in a way we hadn't laughed together in years. "How long do you want me to continue surveillance?" the PI asked. His name was Walter Kim, 60-something, with tired eyes that had probably seen this story 1,000 times. "Keep going," I said. "I need to know everything." By the following Wednesday, I knew plenty. Rachel was 12 weeks pregnant. She'd told people at the office, showed them the ultrasound photos at lunch. My husband, the man who'd looked me in the eye 6 months ago and said, "You'll never be a mother," after our 4th failed IVF cycle, was going to be a father. Just not with me. The dinner party was David's idea. "We should host something," he said one morning in early October, standing in the kitchen in his running gear. He'd taken up jogging at 5 a.m., which I now understood had nothing to do with fitness. "Marcus from the firm is back from London. I thought we could do a casual thing, maybe 8 people. I looked up from my coffee. "Sure." He blinked, clearly expecting resistance. We hadn't entertained in over a year. "Really? Why not?" I smiled. "It'll be fun." The word fun felt like broken glass in my mouth, but I kept smiling. I'd been practicing. In the bathroom mirror, in the car, at my desk at work. I taught 11th grade English at Roosevelt High, and lately I'd been channeling every ounce of performance into appearing normal. The kids noticed nothing. Neither did David. "Great," he said, and I saw relief flood his face. He thought I was getting better, moving on, accepting our childless future while he built a secret family across town. "How about 2 weeks from Saturday?" "Perfect." I started planning immediately. Not the menu or the table settings, that came later. First, I needed to make absolutely certain Rachel would be there. I used David's laptop when he was in the shower. His email password was still the same one he'd used for a decade, our wedding date. The irony wasn't lost on me. I found the office distribution list easily enough, located Rachel's email, and memorized it. Then I created a fake account under the name Jessica Torres, supposedly David's assistant. The email was simple. David asked me to follow up on the dinner party invitation for October 21st, 7 p.m., at his residence. He specifically mentioned hoping you could make it. "Please confirm your attendance. Casual attire." She responded within 20 minutes. "Wouldn't miss it. Should I bring anything?" My smile in the empty house felt like something carved into stone. "Just yourself," I typed back. David avoided me for 3 more days before the party. Not physically. We lived in the same house, slept in the same bed, like 2 corpses laid side by side. But he stopped making eye contact, stopped asking about my day. He'd come home late, shower immediately, and retreat to his office. Sometimes I'd hear him laughing on the phone, voice low and warm in a way it never was with me anymore. "Big project?" I asked one night. standing in his office doorway. He closed his laptop quickly. Just work stuff. You know how it is. I didn't know. Not anymore. David worked for Brennan and Associates, a mid-sized architecture firm in downtown Portland. He'd been there 9 years, worked his way up to senior designer. We'd met at a gallery opening when I was 26 and he was 29. He'd been charming, ambitious, kind. Or I'd thought he was kind. Dinner parties coming together, I said. I got that wine you like. Great. He glanced at his phone. I should finish this. I closed the door and went downstairs to the kitchen, where I'd spread out my notes. Walter had delivered his final report that afternoon. Rachel was definitely pregnant, definitely David's. They'd been seen apartment hunting in the Pearl District. David had been present at her 12-week ultrasound appointment at Providence Hospital. There were other details, romantic details, trips to Cannon Beach, dinners at expensive restaurants I'd never been to, flowers delivered to her office every Friday. My husband was in love, just not with me. The envelope sat on the kitchen counter, thick and legal-looking. I'd sealed it that morning after triple-checking the contents. Everything was in order. Everything was ready. The morning of the party, David actually spoke to me. Melissa. His voice came from the bedroom doorway. I was in the bathroom, putting on moisturizer. Our eyes met in the mirror. Yes? He stepped inside, leaned against the counter. For a moment, he looked like the man I'd married. Then his expression hardened. I think we should talk. My heart stuttered. Okay. After the party, this weekend, maybe we should sit down and discuss things. What things? He couldn't hold my gaze. Us. Where we're at. I don't think we're happy, Mel. There it was. The setup. He'd bring Rachel to dinner, gauge my reaction, then initiate the divorce conversation. Clean, simple, probably already discussed with his lawyer. I wondered if he'd practiced this moment with her, if they'd laughed about how oblivious I was. You're probably right, I said softly. He looked relieved. I'm glad you understand. I understand more than you think. He left before I could say anything else. I finished my routine, got dressed in a simple black dress I'd bought specifically for tonight. Nothing dramatic, nothing that would draw attention. I needed to blend into the background until the perfect moment. By 6:30, everything was ready. The house looked beautiful. I'd spent 3 days cleaning, cooking, arranging flowers. Soft jazz played through the speakers. The dining table was set for 10. I'd added 2 extra places that morning, sent last-minute invitations to 2 colleagues from school who'd accepted eagerly. David came downstairs at 6:45 in dark jeans and a button-down. He looked nervous. Expecting someone, I asked casually, adjusting a napkin. What? No, just the usual people from work. I nodded. Well, whoever shows up, I'm sure it'll be lovely. They arrived in a cluster between 7 and 7:15. First came Patrick and his wife Diane, both lawyers, friends from David's softball league. Then Amy Chen from David's office, with her husband Greg. 2 of my colleagues from Roosevelt, Janet Friedman and Michael Torres. Everyone brought wine. Everyone complimented the house. Everyone seemed genuinely happy to be there. At 7:20, the doorbell rang again. David answered it. I was in the kitchen, watching through the pass-through window. I saw his face change when he opened the door. Surprise, then panic, then a desperate attempt at casual. Rachel, he said too loud. Hi. She stood on our porch in a blue maternity dress, not obviously pregnant yet, but with that distinctive curve if you knew what to look for. She was pretty in an ordinary way. Brown hair, nice smile, nervous energy, young. God, she looked young. I got the email from your assistant, she said. Jessica? She said, right, yes, come in. David's voice cracked slightly. He stepped aside. I emerged from the kitchen, wine glass in hand, smile fixed in place. You must be Rachel. David's mentioned you. So glad you could make it. Her eyes went wide. She looked at David, who'd turned a fascinating shade of grey. "This is my wife, Melissa," he managed. "Nice to meet you," Rachel said weakly. Her hand moved instinctively to her stomach. I watched David's eyes follow the movement, watched him realize that I'd seen it, that I knew. "Come in, please," I said warmly. "Can I get you something to drink? We have sparkling water, juice, wine." "Water would be great," she interrupted. I guided her toward the living room where the others had gathered. Behind me, I heard David release a shaky breath, the first crack in his composure. It made something dark and satisfied settle in my chest. Dinner was excruciating. For them. I'd seated Rachel directly across from David, with me at the head of the table between them. Every time they tried to make eye contact, I'd ask a question or make a comment that demanded attention. I was a conductor, and this was my symphony of discomfort. "So, Rachel, David tells me you're an architect too," I said, passing the roasted chicken. This was a lie. David had never mentioned her name to me. "How long have you worked at Brennan?" 2 years. She took the smallest portion of food I'd ever seen. "That's wonderful. Such a demanding field. Are you working on anything exciting?" David's fork clattered against his plate. "The Riverside Project," he said quickly. "Rachel's been instrumental in that." "Oh, the project in your briefcase." I smiled at him. "The one with all those important documents." His face went white. He knew. In that moment, he understood that I'd found the test. "It's a mixed-use development," Rachel said, oblivious to the tension. "Residential and commercial space near the waterfront." "Sounds ambitious," Janet said. "Must require long hours." "Sometimes," Rachel admitted, "but David's been a great mentor." The word mentor hung in the air like a bad smell. Diane, Patrick's wife, shifted uncomfortably. Amy and Greg exchanged glances. My colleagues looked confused but polite. "David's very good at his job," I said. "Very dedicated. Sometimes he works so late I barely see him." "Mel," David started. "It's fine," I interrupted. "I understand. Important projects require sacrifice." I could feel him unraveling across the table. Rachel was beginning to sense something wrong too. She'd stopped eating entirely, just pushed pasta around her plate, while her other hand rested protectively over her stomach. "Actually," Rachel said suddenly, "I'm not feeling great. I should probably—" "Oh no," I said, standing. "Before you go, I have something for you. Both of you, actually." The room went silent. I walked to the sideboard where I'd placed the envelope that morning, hidden under a stack of napkins. My hands were steady when I picked it up. They'd been steady through everything. "David," I said, returning to the table, "we never got to toast properly. To new beginnings." I lifted my wine glass. A few people raised theirs hesitantly. "To David and Rachel," I continued. My voice was clear, calm, almost cheerful. "And to your family." Rachel's face crumbled. She looked at David, who'd frozen completely. "Congratulations on the baby," I said. 12 weeks, right? That's such an exciting milestone." Someone gasped. Might have been Diane. Janet's mouth fell open. Patrick set down his wine very carefully, like the table might explode. "Melissa," David whispered, "please." "Please what?" I slid the envelope across the table. It landed directly in front of him. "Open it. It's my gift." His hand shook when he picked up the envelope. Everyone watched as he tore it open, pulled out the papers inside. I'd organized them carefully. Divorce petition on top, then the evidence underneath. Photos of him and Rachel. Bank statements showing money transferred to an account I'd never heard of. Text messages Walter had somehow obtained. Hotel receipts, restaurant bills. The positive pregnancy test, which Walter had photographed before I returned it. The last item was a notarized statement from Rachel's OB/GYN, confirming her pregnancy and listing David as the father. Walter had been very thorough. David's face lost every drop of color. He looked like he might vomit right there on my grandmother's tablecloth. "What is this?" Rachel demanded. She'd stood up, was staring at the papers spread across the table. What the hell is this? The truth, I said simply. He's married, you're pregnant, I'm done. You knew? Rachel turned on David. You said you were separated. You said the divorce was almost final. You said, I am separated, David tried. Emotionally, we've been separated for... We sleep in the same bed every night, I interrupted. We share a mortgage, a bank account, a life, or we did until you decided to build a different one. You didn't tell her, Patrick said slowly, looking at David with something like disgust. She doesn't know you're still married. Rachel grabbed her purse. Her face was red, tears streaming down her cheeks. I can't believe this. I can't believe you. Rachel, wait. David stood, reaching for her. Don't touch me. She jerked away. Did you know? This whole time, did you know about her? Of course I knew, David said desperately. But we weren't happy. We haven't been happy in years. You and me, what we have is real. The baby is real. You told me you couldn't have kids, Rachel shouted. You said it was medical, that you'd always wanted to be a father, but it wasn't possible. You said, I couldn't have kids with her, David yelled back. Melissa can't get pregnant. 4 IVF cycles, all failures. I wanted a family, Rachel. I wanted a child. The room went dead silent. I felt every eye turn to me, but I kept my gaze locked on David. This was the moment. This was what I'd been waiting for. Show them, I said quietly. What? Page 7. Show everyone page 7. His hands fumbled with the papers. When he found it, I watched understanding dawn across his face like a sunrise. Read it out loud, I said. Melissa? Read it. He cleared his throat. His voice came out broken. Medical report from Dr. Patricia Valdez, reproductive endocrinologist. Patient, David Mitchell. Diagnosis, severe oligospermia with poor motility. Prognosis, extremely low probability of natural conception. Keep reading, I said. Tests conducted, October 2019, March 2021, June 2023. All tests confirm. Confirm consistent low sperm count and poor quality. Recommendation, donor sperm or adoption for family planning. Rachel sat down heavily. What does that mean? It means, I said, looking at David, that he's the reason we couldn't have children. Not me, him. His doctors told him years ago. Before we even started IVF. You knew, Michael said. You knew it was your problem and you let her think. I was handling it, David stammered. I thought maybe with treatment. You watched me inject myself with hormones every day for 4 rounds of IVF, I said. My voice was steady, but something cold was rising in my chest. You watched me gain weight, lose hair, cry myself sick every time it failed. You held my hand in the doctor's office while they told us it didn't work, again and again. And then you looked at me and said, You'll never be a mother. Like it was my fault, like I was broken. I didn't mean, yes, you did. I stood up. You meant every word. And then you found someone younger, someone you thought might give you what you wanted. Except that's not how biology works, David. Rachel's face had gone from red to white. The baby... Look at page 8, I told her. She reached across and grabbed the papers. Her hands were shaking as she found the page. A DNA report from a prenatal paternity test. Walter had outdone himself, somehow obtained a sample from the OB/GYN office. That's not possible, Rachel whispered. We were careful. I wasn't seeing anyone else. There's only one other option, Janet said quietly. We all watched it hit Rachel. The calculation, the dates, the truth. Her face transformed into something terrible and resigned. Before David, she said to herself, that conference in Seattle. I met someone one night, but I thought, we use protection, I thought. Protection fails, I said, not unkindly. But David's sperm count makes natural conception almost impossible. The timing doesn't work. Basic math. You lied to me about everything, Rachel said to David. Her voice was hollow. You're married. You can't have kids. And this baby isn't even... She couldn't finish. David looked like a man watching his life collapse in real time. We can do a real test, a proper one. This could be wrong. It's not wrong, I said. I had it verified by 3 separate labs. Walter was very thorough. Who the hell is Walter? David demanded. My private investigator. I hired him the day after I found Rachel's pregnancy test in your briefcase. Patrick stood up first. Diane, we should go. Agreed. She didn't look at David. None of them did as they filed toward the door. Amy and Greg left without a word. My colleagues followed, Janet squeezing my shoulder on the way out. Rachel was the last, moving like a sleepwalker. At the door, she turned back. I'm sorry, she said to me. I didn't know. He said you were separated. He said so many things. I know. I'm keeping the baby. Whoever the father is, I'm keeping it. That's your choice, I said. Good luck. She left. The door closed. And then it was just David and me in the ruins of our dinner party. He stood in the middle of the dining room, still holding the papers. You set this up, all of it. Yes. You humiliated me, in front of everyone. Yes. You could have just filed for divorce, quietly, like a normal person. I started gathering plates, scraping uneaten food into the trash. You told me I'd never be a mother, David. You said it like a diagnosis, like I was defective. You knew the whole time it was your problem, and you let me believe I was broken. I was going to tell you. When? After the baby was born? After you moved in with Rachel? When exactly were you planning to mention that you'd been lying about your infertility for 4 years? He had no answer. I kept cleaning. The mechanical nature of it was soothing. Load the dishwasher, wrap the leftovers, wipe down the counters. David watched me work, saying nothing. Finally, he spoke. What happens now? You sign the divorce papers. My lawyer will send the final versions next week. I'm keeping the house. It was my inheritance from my parents anyway. You can have the car, the furniture, whatever you want from storage. I'm keeping the retirement accounts. You emptied our savings to buy things for Rachel, so that seems fair. Melissa. I'm keeping the dog too. You never liked Bailey anyway. That's not... I'm done, David. I turned to face him. I'm done crying, done wondering what I did wrong, done shrinking myself to make room for your ego and your lies. You wanted a different life? Fine, go have it, but not with my silence. He looked at the papers still in his hands. She'll never take me back now. Probably not. The baby isn't even mine. No. Everyone at work will know by Monday. Almost certainly. He crumpled then, actually sank down onto one of the dining chairs, and put his head in his hands. I screwed up everything. Yes, I agreed. You really did. I finished loading the dishwasher, started it running. The sound filled the kitchen, normal and domestic and utterly at odds with the crater where our marriage used to be. Where will you go? I asked. I don't know. Hotel, maybe. You should pack tonight. I want you gone by morning. He looked up, face streaked with tears. I loved you. Once. I really did. I know, I said, and I did. There'd been a time when we were happy, when the future had looked bright and full of possibility. But that was before the infertility, before the lies, before he'd decided I was the problem instead of facing his own. I'm sorry, he whispered. So am I. He stood, moved toward the stairs. Halfway up, he stopped. The IVF cycles. If you'd known it was me, would you have stayed? I thought about it, really thought about it. Maybe, if you'd been honest, if we'd faced it together. But you didn't. You let me blame myself, and then you went looking for someone to give you what I couldn't. So we'll never know. He nodded and disappeared upstairs. I heard drawers opening, the closet door sliding, the sounds of a life being packed into boxes. I sat down at the kitchen table with a glass of wine and the copy of the divorce papers I'd kept for myself. Everything was in order. My lawyer had been thorough. The house, the accounts, the clean break. David would sign or he wouldn't, but either way, I was done. Bailey padded into the kitchen, his old yellow lab head resting on my knee. I scratched behind his ears. "Just us now, buddy," I said. He wagged his tail. Upstairs, David was still packing. I could hear him moving around, probably trying to figure out what to take, what to leave, how to explain this disaster to his family and friends. By Monday, everyone at Brennan and Associates would know. Rachel would tell them, or Amy would, or one of the dozen other people who'd been at that dinner. His reputation was ruined. His relationship was over. His dream of fatherhood was exposed as a lie. He'd never be able to have children naturally, and now everyone knew it. I'd taken everything from him in one perfectly orchestrated evening. And I didn't feel guilty at all. He left at 6 the next morning. I watched from the bedroom window as he loaded his car, 3 suitcases, and a box of personal items. He looked up once, saw me standing there, then drove away without waving. The house felt lighter immediately. I called Janet later that morning. "Hey, Melissa, my God. Are you okay?" "I'm fine. Better than fine, actually." That was the most intense dinner party I've ever attended. Michael and I talked about it for 2 hours after we got home. Sorry to drag you into it. Are you kidding? That was justified warfare. What he did to you, letting you think the infertility was your fault, that's unconscionable. Yeah, I said, it really was. What are you going to do now? Good question. I looked around the house, my house, paid for with my parents' life insurance after the accident that killed them when I was 23. David had moved in after the wedding, but it had never really been his. The furniture was mine. The art was mine. The life I'd built here was mine. Live, I said. Just live. I hung up and spent the rest of the weekend cleaning. Not anxious cleaning, but the kind that makes space. I packed up David's remaining things, clothes he'd forgotten, toiletries, books. By Sunday evening, there was no trace of him anywhere. Monday morning, I went back to work. The kids were reading The Great Gatsby, and we spent the period discussing betrayal and the American dream. One of my students, a sharp girl named Kennedy, raised her hand. "Ms. Mitchell, do you think Daisy could ever really love Gatsby? Or was she always going to choose Tom?" I thought about David, about Rachel, about all the choices that lead to disaster. I think Daisy loved the idea of Gatsby, but love isn't enough if you're lying to yourself about who someone really is. Kennedy nodded thoughtfully. That's depressing. That's reality. After school, I stopped at the grocery store, then the gym, then home to cook dinner for one, which took some adjusting. I'd been cooking for 2 for 11 years, but I'd figure it out. I'd figure everything out. Wednesday, David's lawyer called mine. He'd signed the papers. No contest, no negotiation, no drama. My lawyer sounded surprised. "He's accepting all your terms," she said. "House, accounts, everything. He just wants it done." Good. Melissa, I have to say, I've been doing this 20 years, and I've never seen someone handle a divorce this strategically. Whatever you did, it worked. I smiled into the phone. Thank you. The divorce would be final in 6 months. Oregon law required a waiting period. I could live with that. That Friday, Walter called. Wanted to check in, make sure you're okay. I'm good, Walter, really good. That was some dinner party. You should have seen the look on his face. He laughed, a dry sound. I've been doing this job 30 years. That was the most satisfying case I've ever worked. You paid me to find the truth, and the truth destroyed him. That's justice. What about Rachel? I asked. Any update? She moved back to Seattle last week, told the office she's transferring to their Northwest branch. Word is, she ended things with David completely. Won't return his calls. And the baby? Still pregnant, still planning to keep it. Filed for child support against the real father, the guy from the Seattle conference. Apparently he's a lawyer, married, willing to pay to keep it quiet. That's a mess. Your ex-husband certainly knows how to pick them. I laughed. Couldn't help it. The whole thing was so ridiculous, so perfectly disastrous for David. He'd gambled everything on a fantasy and lost. Thanks for all your work, Walter. Anytime. And Melissa, be happy. You deserve it. I hung up and looked around my house. My life. Mine. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. 3 weeks later, David showed up at the house. I almost didn't answer the door when I saw him through the peephole. But curiosity won. I opened it, kept the chain lock on. What do you want? He looked terrible. Unshaven, wrinkled clothes, circles under his eyes. Can we talk? No. Please, 5 minutes. Against my better judgment, I let him in. We stood in the foyer, maintaining distance. I made a mistake, he said. A huge mistake. I see that now. Okay. I want to try again. Us. I want to fix this. I stared at him. You're not serious. I am. We had something good, Mel. Before everything went wrong. We can get back to that. Before everything went wrong, I repeated. You mean before you lied about the infertility? Before you cheated? Before you humiliated me in front of your colleagues? Which part specifically? I was scared, he said. When I found out it was me, that I couldn't give you kids, I panicked. I thought if I could just fix it somehow. By lying. By making me think I was the problem. It was stupid. I know that now, but we can move past it. People do it all the time. I shook my head slowly. David, you told me I'd never be a mother. You looked me in the eye and blamed me for something that was your fault all along. You let me go through medical procedures that were pointless. You made me feel broken, and then you tried to replace me with someone younger. Rachel was a mistake. Rachel was a symptom. The problem is you. You're selfish and cruel, and you only care about yourself. His face hardened. You ruined my life. No, I corrected. I revealed your life. There's a difference. Everyone at work knows. They look at me like I'm garbage. Rachel won't speak to me. I'm living in a motel. I have nothing. You have yourself, I said. That should be more than enough for someone like you. I hate you, he whispered. I don't care. And I didn't. That was the stunning revelation. I genuinely did not care what David thought or felt about me. He'd become a stranger, someone I used to know, someone who'd hurt me badly, but no longer had any power over my life. Get out, I said. Melissa, get out of my house, now, or I call the police. He left, slammed the door hard enough to rattle the frame. I watched through the window as he got in his car. Not the nice one we'd shared, but some beat-up Honda he must have bought used. He sat there for a long time, head against the steering wheel. Then he drove away, and I locked the door behind him. Epilogue. Wait, no epilogue. 6 months later, the divorce was final. I got the certificate in the mail on a Thursday. I looked at it for exactly 30 seconds, then filed it away in the cabinet with all the other important documents. Done. Finished. Over. Life moved on. I dated occasionally, nothing serious. Joined a book club. Started training for a half marathon. Adopted a second dog, a border collie puppy named Scout who kept Bailey young. I repainted the bedroom, got rid of the furniture that reminded me of David, bought new things that were completely mine. At school, I got promoted to department chair. The kids kept reading, kept learning, kept asking smart questions about literature and life. I loved my job. I never saw David again after that day in the foyer. Heard through the grapevine that he'd left Brennan and Associates, moved to Eugene, started working for a smaller firm. He'd had to sell his car to pay his share of our marital debts. He was living in a studio apartment alone. Rachel had her baby in Seattle. A girl. The real father was involved, quietly, sending money and visiting on weekends. She'd apparently moved on with her life too. wiser and more careful about who she trusted. And me? I stood in my kitchen one Saturday morning, coffee in hand, dogs at my feet, sun streaming through the windows. The house was quiet, peaceful, mine. I'd survived the worst thing I could imagine: betrayal, lies, years of misplaced blame. And I hadn't just survived, I'd won. Not by destroying David, though I'd certainly done that. I'd won by refusing to let his lies define me, by taking back my power, by living. The doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. I opened it to find a courier with a certified letter. I signed for it, closed the door, opened the envelope. It was from Dr. Patricia Valdez, the fertility specialist. A brief note, paperclip to a medical report. Melissa, thought you'd want to see this. Recent research suggests your hormone levels have normalized significantly since stopping IVF treatments. While I can't make promises, your fertility prospects now appear much better than previous assessments indicated. If you're interested in exploring parenthood options in the future, please call my office. I read it twice, then 3 times. Then I laughed, not bitterly, not sadly, just genuinely laughed at the cosmic irony of it all. David had told me I'd never be a mother. He'd lied about so many things, but that particular lie might have been the cruelest. And now, months after walking away from him, I held proof that even that might not be true. I wasn't sure if I wanted kids anymore. That dream had been beaten out of me over 4 years of failed treatments and David's emotional abuse. But knowing I had options, that my body wasn't the broken thing he'd made me believe it was, that felt like winning the lottery. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in my desk drawer. Maybe I'd call Dr. Valdez next week. Maybe I wouldn't. The point was, it was my choice now. My life, my future, my decision. Bailey nudged my hand with his nose, wanting attention. Scout barked at a squirrel outside the window. I had papers to grade, laundry to fold, a life to live. David was somewhere in Eugene, probably still blaming me for the consequences of his own choices. Rachel was in Seattle with a baby that wasn't his, and I was here, in my house, free. I poured another cup of coffee and sat down at the kitchen table where, 6 months ago, I'd served divorce papers as dessert. The memory made me smile. Someone once told me that living well is the best revenge. They were wrong. Living honestly is the best revenge. Living authentically. Refusing to shrink yourself for someone else's comfort. David wanted me to be small, broken, grateful for whatever scraps of attention he threw my way. Instead, I'd become the thing he feared most, a woman who knew her worth and refused to accept less. That was better than any revenge. I picked up my phone and called Janet. "Hey, want to grab dinner tonight?" "Always. Everything okay?" "Everything's perfect," I said. And for the first time in years, I meant it. Outside, the sun climbed higher in a clear blue sky. Scout chased Bailey around the backyard, their joyful barking filtering through the open window. I watched them play, these 2 dogs who depended on me, loved me unconditionally, asked for nothing but food and affection and walks. Simple, honest, real. My phone buzzed, a text from Michael Torres, my colleague who'd been at the dinner party. "Janet told me about your promotion. Congratulations, department chair. We should celebrate." I typed back, "Drinks next Friday." It's a date. Not a date. Just friends, colleagues, people who actually respected me. The kind of relationships I should have been building all along, instead of pouring everything into a marriage with a man who saw me as defective. I spent the rest of the morning grading essays. My AP literature students had written about redemption in the Scarlet Letter, and their insights were surprisingly sophisticated. One student, Marcus— no, wait, I'd said no Marcus. One student, Brandon, had written, "Hester's real crime wasn't adultery. It was letting society define her worth. She only found peace when she stopped accepting their narrative." I wrote in the margin, Excellent analysis. What does it mean to define your own narrative? He'd answered his own question in the next paragraph. It means living in truth, even when truth is uncomfortable, especially then. Smart kid, I gave him an A. By afternoon, I'd finished the grading and decided to go for a run. The half-marathon training was going well. I was up to 8 miles without stopping. Something about running cleared my head, made everything else fall away until it was just breath and movement and the steady rhythm of feet on pavement. I passed the park where David and I used to walk Bailey on Sunday mornings. A young couple sat on our bench, not our bench anymore, just a bench, laughing about something. The woman was visibly pregnant, her hand on her belly in that protective gesture I'd seen Rachel make at the dinner party. I felt nothing. No envy, no bitterness, no longing. Just a vague awareness that they existed, that their happiness had nothing to do with me. Keep running. At mile 5, my legs burned and my lungs ached, and I felt gloriously alive. This body that David had made me hate, that I'd pumped full of hormones and hope, it was strong. It carried me. It worked exactly the way it was supposed to. I pushed harder, faster, until I hit mile 8 and had to stop, hands on knees, gasping for air, but grinning like an idiot. You okay? A cyclist had stopped, concerned. Perfect, I managed. Just finishing my run. You look happy. I am. He smiled and rode on. I walked the last half-mile home, cooling down, thinking about nothing and everything. Back at the house, I showered and changed into comfortable clothes. Saturday afternoon stretched ahead with no obligations, no one to answer to, no one's mood to manage. I could read, watch a movie, call a friend, do absolutely nothing. I chose nothing. I lay on the couch with both dogs, Scout's head on my stomach, and Bailey sprawled across my legs, and stared at the ceiling. The house was quiet, except for the dogs breathing and the distant hum of traffic. This was my life now. Peaceful, simple, mine. My phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won again. Hello? Melissa Mitchell? A woman's voice, professional. Yes? This is Christina Webb from Pacific Northwest Magazine. I'm doing a feature on women who've rebuilt their lives after difficult divorces. Your lawyer, Patricia Chen, suggested I contact you. I sat up, dislodging Scout. My lawyer gave you my number. With your permission, she said, she mentioned your story might inspire other women going through similar situations. I don't think... It would be anonymous, Christina interrupted. No names, no identifying details. Just the story of how you discovered the infidelity and handled it. Patricia said it was remarkable. I thought about it. All those women out there, right now, going through what I'd gone through. Being lied to, being blamed, being made to feel small and broken and worthless. Maybe my story could help them see another way. Can I think about it? I asked. Of course. I'll email you the details. No pressure. She hung up. I stared at my phone. The old Melissa would have said no immediately. Would have wanted to hide, to pretend the whole thing never happened, to protect David's dignity even after everything he'd done. The new Melissa? I opened my laptop and typed an email. Christina, I'll do the interview. When works for you? I hit send before I could second-guess myself. The interview happened 2 weeks later at a coffee shop downtown. Christina was younger than I expected, maybe 30, with sharp eyes and a recording device she placed carefully between us. Thank you for doing this. Thank you for the opportunity. So, she began, start wherever feels right. When did you first suspect something was wrong? I told her everything. The pregnancy test and the briefcase. The investigation. The years of IVF and David's lies about his infertility. The dinner party. The envelope. The perfectly orchestrated revelation that destroyed his life while I walked away clean. She didn't interrupt, just let me talk. When I finished, she sat back. That's incredible, she said. The planning, the control. You never lost your temper. Not once. Why not? Most people would have confronted him immediately. Because anger makes you sloppy, I said. I wanted him to face consequences. Real consequences. That required strategy. Do you regret it? The public humiliation? I considered the question honestly. No. He humiliated me privately for years. He deserved one night of public truth. Some people might say you were cruel. Some people haven't been told they're broken by the person who broke them. She nodded and turned off the recorder. Off the record. That was the most satisfying revenge story I've ever heard. You're my hero. I laughed. I'm nobody's hero. I'm just someone who refused to be a victim. That's what makes you a hero. The article came out a month later. I was Jane, a high school teacher whose husband had lied about infertility. The comment section exploded, thousands of women sharing similar stories, thanking Jane for showing them it was possible to fight back. Some commenters called me vindictive, others said I should have handled it privately, but most understood. Most had been there, in some version of that pain, and they recognized the justice in what I'd done. Janet read the article and knew immediately it was me. You're Jane. Maybe. That took guts. Or stupidity. No, she said firmly. Guts. You told the truth. That always takes guts. Winter came. Portland rain, grey skies, early darkness. I loved it. There's something about winter that feels like permission to be quiet, to turn inward, to exist without explanation. I spent evenings reading by the fireplace, dogs at my feet, completely content. David tried to contact me twice more. Both times through his lawyer, asking if I'd consider a reconciliation meeting. Both times I said no. My lawyer sent a cease and desist letter after the third attempt. He got the message. Through the grapevine, I heard he'd started dating again. Some woman he'd met at a yoga class. I felt nothing. He was as relevant to my life as a stranger on the street. The fertility doctor's letter stayed in my drawer. I'd taken it out a few times, read it, considered calling. But I wasn't ready. Maybe I never would be. The point wasn't whether I had children. The point was that I had choices. One Saturday in December, I ran into Amy from David's office at the grocery store. Melissa. She looked uncomfortable. How are you? Good. Really good. I'm glad. That dinner party, I've never seen anything like it. Neither had I. She laughed nervously. David doesn't work with us anymore. He left in November. I heard. He made his own mess, you know. People respected you for how you handled it. The infertility lies, the cheating. Nobody blamed you for exposing that. That's good to know. Anyway, she shifted her groceries. I just wanted to say, you seem happy, happier than I ever saw you with him. I am, I said, and meant it. She smiled and walked away. I finished my shopping, drove home, made dinner for myself and the dogs. Normal, easy, perfect. That night, I pulled out the letter from Dr. Valdez one more time, read it slowly, carefully, letting myself really absorb what it meant. I could be a mother. Maybe. If I wanted. On my own terms, with my own choices, without someone else's lies poisoning the dream. Did I want that? I didn't know yet, but I was starting to think maybe I did. Not the desperate, painful wanting from before. Something quieter, more certain, more mine. I picked up my phone and dialed the office number on the letterhead. Dr. Valdez's office, this is Kelly. Hi, this is Melissa Mitchell. I'd like to schedule a consultation. Of course. Let me check the calendar. How's January 10th? Perfect. I hung up and sat with the decision. It felt right. Not rushed, not desperate, just right. Maybe I'd pursue motherhood. Maybe I wouldn't, but I'd make that choice from a place of strength, not from the broken place David had left me in. That was everything. Spring arrived eventually, the way it always does. Cherry blossoms in the park, longer days, warmer air. Bailey's arthritis improved with the weather, and Scout finally learned not to dig up the garden. I ran my half marathon in April, finished in 2 hours and 8 minutes, not fast but respectable. Janet and Michael were waiting at the finish line with a ridiculous sign that said, "Department chairs run the world." We went for brunch after, and I ate an enormous stack of pancakes without guilt. My consultation with Dr. Valdez had been informative. Yes, my fertility had improved. Yes, I could pursue various options. Natural conception, if I met someone, IUI with donor sperm, even IVF with better odds than before. The choice was mine, and there was no rush. I hadn't decided anything yet, but knowing I had options was enough. The divorce was a year in the past now. It felt like ancient history, something that had happened to a different version of me. The woman who'd found that pregnancy test seemed young and naive, someone I barely recognized. I liked who I'd become instead. Harder, maybe, definitely wiser, but also more authentically myself than I'd ever been. One evening in May, I was grading papers on the back porch when my phone rang. Unknown number again. "Hello? Melissa, it's Rachel." I froze. Rachel. I know I shouldn't call, but I needed to, I don't know. Apologize, explain. "You don't owe me anything." "I do, though. I helped destroy your marriage." "No," I said firmly. "David destroyed the marriage. You were just a symptom of what was already broken." She was quiet for a moment. "I had the baby. A girl, Emma." "Congratulations." "She's beautiful. The father, the real father, he's involved. We're not together, but he's trying. And I'm okay. I moved back to Portland, actually. Got a job with a different firm." "That's good. I saw David last week, at a coffee shop. He looked terrible." I said nothing. "He asked about you," Rachel continued. "Asked if I knew how you were doing. I told him I didn't know, but that you'd probably moved on. He looked like I'd stabbed him." "Rachel, why are you telling me this?" "Because I want you to know. What you did that night at the dinner party, it saved me. If you hadn't exposed him, I'd have kept believing his lies. I'd have tried to build a life with a man who was never going to be honest. You set me free." My throat tightened unexpectedly. "I wasn't trying to save you. I was trying to save myself." "I know, but you did both." We talked for a few more minutes. She told me about Emma, about her new job, about therapy and rebuilding. I told her about the promotion, the half marathon, the dogs. 2 women who'd been caught in the same man's web of lies, now living separate, honest lives. When we hung up, I sat for a long time watching the sunset. David had tried to make us both believe we needed him, that we were incomplete without him, that our worth was measured by his attention. He'd been wrong. I thought about the envelope I'd slid across that dinner table a year ago. The way every drop of color had left David's face when he'd opened it. The way his perfectly constructed lies had crumbled in real time. That moment had been about more than revenge. It had been about truth, about refusing to carry someone else's shame, about standing up and saying, "I am not broken, you are." And I'd been right. The sun dropped below the horizon, painting the sky purple and orange and gold. Scout barked at a neighbor's cat. Bailey snored on the porch beside me. My life, my choices, my future. Whatever came next, motherhood or not, partnership or not, adventure or peace, it would be mine, built on truth, rooted in strength, free from the weight of David's lies. I stood up, stretched, called the dogs inside. Time for dinner, for the evening routine, for the simple pleasure of a life well lived. The envelope had changed everything, but not because it destroyed David, because it freed me, and that made all the difference. I closed and locked the back door, made dinner, watched TV with the dogs, went to bed early. Tomorrow I'd wake up in my house, live my life, make my choices. David would wake up somewhere in Eugene, living with the consequences of his actions. Rachel would wake up in Portland, raising her daughter, building something real. And me? I'd wake up free. That was the real ending. Not dramatic, not cinematic, just honest, just true, just mine.